Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players of the gigging variety. I'm your host David Holloway and it's great as always to be here with you. My guest this episode is Kevin Hearn. Now Kevin is perhaps best known as keyboard player with the Barenaked Ladies, an iconic Canada-based band who's had huge worldwide success. But as I discovered when I completed my research for the interview, Kevin is someone who's created one incredible body of work across a range of genres. So I hope you enjoy this interview as we try to cover everything Kevin's done, from obviously playing with the Barenaked Ladies to being musical director and keyboard player with Lou Reed, and a hell of a lot more in between. So yes, I hope you enjoy it. Hi Kevin, thanks so much for joining us, particularly on a Thursday night.
Hello.
Now I was going to say this anyway, but you've just proven the point. I was going to say that from doing a little bit of research on yourself that you are one busy man, and you've proven it tonight because you've already been doing a whole bunch of great stuff this afternoon and into the evening. Do you ever slow down?
I try to, but then I get sucked back in. And you know why? It's because I frickin' love what I do. I love music, and there's not enough time, so I just got to do it when I can.
And that certainly comes across. But just one of the questions I've been asking in recent weeks is how are you coping with the lockdown? You're obviously not getting bored.
No, I've been in isolation before, and some of my best creative work, I believe, has been done when I'm in isolation. So I'm kind of I'm embracing it. I'm not putting any creative pressure on myself. I'm spending a lot of good quality time with my daughter, and just taking it day by day, and hoping it all means something, and hoping that it all leads to a better world and us as better people.
Yes, absolutely. And on isolation, I assume you're talking about there. You spent some time, both growing up and more recently on a cottage by the lake. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm referring to the fact that I had a bone marrow transplant.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's a 5-year recovery, and when you're really in the thick of it, you have to be in an isolated room because they basically zap your immune system. So I was in a hospital room for about a month, and you couldn't have visitors. You couldn't have anything that was porous, like cardboard. You couldn't have any raw food in there. And so it was very strict and an awful time, but it was there I really fell in love with music again and appreciated its healing qualities, and wrote a really important record in my life called H-Wing, which is the wing of the hospital where I was staying. So sorry, I'm just blathering on.
No, not at all. And I'm very, very keen to talk about your solo work because it's impressive to say the least. So I'll jump back a little bit and then we'll definitely come forward to that because I am really keen to talk about it. So, Kevin Hearn, the young man, what got you into music? What led to you ending up in a career in music?
I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers, and I was number 5 out of 6 kids. Yeah. And grew up middle class. We all shared bedrooms, and there was a lot of music in our house. And everyone had a bit of a different taste. So depending on where you wandered through the house, you might hear my mom playing Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, or Andy Williams. You might hear my dad listening to jazz. You might hear my brothers listening to Jimi Hendrix or Kiss, or my sister Mary Pat listening to the Bay City Rollers, So I fell in love with the Beatles and the Beach Boys when I was about 5 years old, along with all the other things. But those two really stood out. And my first record that I ever bought with money that I asked for from my mom was a cassette of Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah.
And yeah, for a kid to see the characters of the Beatles when they were kind of dressed up as the walrus and the other animals, I can't really remember. I'd have to get the album out here, but it just fascinated me as a kid, and I was like, this is the world I want to exist in.
Yeah.
So I asked my mom, I said, I got to get piano lessons because my older brothers and sisters were taking piano lessons and I couldn't wait.
And obviously those piano lessons paid off. So how did you actually find the learning process for the keyboard, as far as it was something you took to like a duck to water, or it was a little bit of work there?
It was a little bit of work, and my favorite thing was to just improvise. I always loved just diving in and making noise. And eventually, sorry about that. Speaking of making noise, eventually sort of putting my emotions or whatever I was going through in my life, whether it was my parents breaking up or anything, but break up with a girl I liked, I put it into playing the piano. My mom, she would be upstairs and I'd always hear this, "That's not your practicing. Those aren't your scales," And so my mom proposed a deal, and that was, you do an hour of your scales and your pieces, and then you can improvise for an hour or however long you want. So that's kind of how I progressed in my daily piano time. I would do the scales and learn a piece or two, and then improvise.
That's a good balance too. So a lot of parents wouldn't have done that. So there tends to be that stereotype of buckle down and do your lessons and then you're done. Whereas you had that balance, which probably made all the difference.
It sure did. And I don't know, I never really thought of that way until you said that. But you're right. Many parents may not have taken that route. So thanks, Mom.
That's right. Thanks, Mum. And so how did that translate? Obviously, you're doing lessons. What led you to joining your first bands? So I'm aware you've been in a number of bands. What led to those first few experiences?
Well, as I said, I really loved the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and the piano I was learning, it was very classical. And the school I went to I went to a place called St. Michael's Choir School from grade 3 to grade 10, and it really focused on sacred music. So there was a lot of music in my life, but I wouldn't say it was music that really resonated with me as, what age I was at and what I was able to appreciate. And I was playing, there used to be this game, they actually sold it, it's illegal now, but I think it was called lawn darts. And I was playing lawn darts with my friend Billy, who lived across the street. We were on his front lawn, and he had a portable tape deck radio, and it was out on the sidewalk. And this song came on the radio, and I was transfixed, man. It was "Walk on the Wild Side" by Lou Reed.
Yeah.
And it just drew me in. And I still remember that first moment hearing Lou's voice and thinking, what is this? And my eldest sister, who lived in the basement, and, she was kind of a rebellious person. I went to her, I said, have you ever heard of this guy, Lou Reed? And she had the Transformer album. She actually had it, and I still have that record now. It's, in my collection right behind me. So that sort of turned me on to a whole new world of music, and I started playing guitar, and guitar sort of became my rebellious instrument. I would practice the piano, the scales, and that sort of thing. but I started playing guitar and learning songs by Lou Reed, Neil Young, the Beatles. Do you mind if I just blather on here for a minute longer?
No, this is what it's about. And I was about to say, we will definitely talk about Lou Reed later as well. But no, please do.
Okay, because it all connects.
It does.
So I was learning guitar and starting to join bands as a guitarist, but then the choir I was in, St. Michael's Choir School, we were invited to take part at Roy Thompson Hall with the premiere Canadian performance of Mahler's Eighth Symphony.
Wow.
Yes, and it was an ear-opening experience, an eye-opening experience, a soul-opening experience. The power of the music, it really moved me, and I suddenly appreciated classical music and the beauty of it, and started approaching the piano with a lot more enthusiasm and appreciation for what an incredible instrument it is.
And I mean, just as an aside on that, I've said this before on this podcast, that if I was asked the most powerful musical experience I've ever had, it was sitting in the middle of I think it was only a 45-piece orchestra involved in a production of Jesus Christ Superstar. And like you, it was just one of those ear-opening moments. You go, okay, I understand now why orchestras have the power they do.
Yeah, and why they've lasted so long and are still important. It's true. And I heard a record recently. It was an orchestra performing the Flaming Lips, the Song Bulletin record. And it was, again, a great fit for that sort of, it was a great fit.
So the ears were opened, and then I'm assuming, was it the traditional, saw an ad in the paper for a keyboard player for a band or a guitar player for a band, and you joined one, or you put something together yourself in those early days?
I was always kind of playing with friends from the choir school, and as I got more into high school, I started getting into weirder music and started appreciating keyboard music more and really getting into bands like The Residents and Kraftwerk. I really liked the keyboardist from the Stranglers, Devo. And as much as I wanted to be a cool guitarist, most bands that wanted me to play with them would ask me to play piano or keyboards. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm a good keyboard player. And so I let me think. Yeah, the first band I really think was creative and original was my high school band called the Glaciers.
Okay.
Yeah, and we were a bunch of loners and stoners, and we didn't go out on the weekends. We'd go into my friend Anthony Brown's basement, and he had a 4-track recorder, and he had a room full of synthesizers, and we would make strange music. And boy, was it fun. He had a Korg monopoly.
Wow.
He had a Korg Poly 6, and a few other things. But that was my first band, and I sort of stuck with those guys. They were my best friends all through high school.
And I think you did well. You had a great band name for your first band.
Yeah, I think so. The Glaciers. Yeah.
That's very good.
I just transferred a lot of our old cassettes into Pro Tools, and some of it's embarrassing, but there was some gems. It's amazing to look back and when you don't know the music business and you're just making music for the pure joy of it and adventure of it, it's really quite astounding what you can come up with.
And obviously you finished up school then, and what led you to the decision that you were going to try this full time, or did you even do this full time from the get-go, or did you have another series of jobs prior?
When I was in grade 13, there was a girl I really liked. She was the first love of my life, Susie Brady, and she was dating this punk rocker guy named Ian Sane, and he was, he was very intimidating, but he had this act he was doing called Mr. Personality, where he would do sort of punk rock versions of songs, and he, through her, asked if I would join his band and play the keyboards. So that was sort of my first out of high school experience. And I think we did 4 gigs, but during those 4 gigs, I was approached by this other notorious band from Toronto called the Look People. And they were like a prog rock band. It was like King Crimson meets Frank Zappa meets Dr. Seuss. And we rehearsed a lot, and the arrangements were very extravagant and stupid at times. Like in this verse, we're going to do 3 shots, and the next verse, we're going to do 11 for no reason. But the Look People, man, that was my first professional band, and we were playing in the bars in Toronto. Yeah.
That's great. And then I know you had some other outfits you're involved with, but probably let's jump forward then to hooking up with the Barenaked Ladies in mid-90s. So how did that come about? Just from your previous work, or knowing someone and playing with them, or?
Well, the Look People were pretty well known in the Toronto music scene, and so through them I was invited to play with some other groups in Toronto. One group called the Rheostatics, and a comedy troupe, a musical comedy troupe called Corky and the Juice Pigs. And those 2 bands, the Barenaked Ladies, were huge fans of both of those bands. So they would be at the shows and they saw me play. And I believe they just finished working on their 3rd record. And Jim Cregan's brother, Andy Cregan, left the band. And they put me and said, Kevin, we don't want to go through a big audition process. We really like you, and we were hoping to do a 2.5-month tour with us. And after that tour, they invited me to join as a band member. So
there you go.
That was 1995.
Yeah, a long time ago. And for our non-Canadian listeners, the Barenaked Ladies are extremely well known now, but I think it's just worth reinforcing that prior to that widespread world success, Barenaked Ladies were an extremely well-established, very important, iconic band in Canada. So, and you may laugh at this, Kevin, but from where I'm sitting in Australia, you were sort of, Barenaked Ladies was sort of an In Excess level in Canada, like In Excess was in Australia before they hit the world. Yeah, I know it's not a great analogy because they're very different musical styles, well, different type of rock, but I was introduced by Canadian friends and was just blown away back in the 90s. So it's just worth mentioning to our non-Canadian listeners just what a well-established band you guys were even before hitting that even bigger success.
Well, thank you. When I hear In Excess, I always considered them a pretty top-level band,
Yeah, well, I think like you guys, they had that initial, they worked extremely hard, did a lot of touring in their home country, and then sort of went on to conquer other markets. So
there's a songwriter from Australia, I believe, who I've recently really fallen in love with his songs. It's Robert Forster.
Oh yes, absolutely, from the Go-Betweens. Yeah, he's again, this I shouldn't even make this comparison. He, to some extent, is a little bit of a Gord Downey-ish character for Australians.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
It's not a totally fair comparison, but yeah, he's an iconic guy and obviously very well respected. Yeah.
Do you mean like his poetic, the poetic quality of his lyrics?
Yeah, that's right. The poetic quality of his lyrics and just that sitting outside looking in sort of approach to his songwriting. Yeah, very, very good. So yeah, if you haven't checked out the Go-Betweens back catalogue, and obviously Robert's done a lot of stuff since as well. Yeah, very well worth a look.
Okay.
So you're in the Barenaked Ladies. Obviously, that's a busy life on its own. From a keyboard playing viewpoint, do you want to just give us a little bit of a insight into how do you approach your work? I mean, you've got a huge back catalogue. You tour regularly when you're not locked down. I know you've got a rescheduled tour later this year. What's your overall work approach to working as a keyboard player?
Oh, gosh. Well, my first instrument is piano.
Yeah.
So that's usually the source of where I kind of work out melodies. It's my comfort zone. But for colors, I love thinking of synth possibilities and creating sounds. Go-to synths like the Mini Moog or the Access Virus, which I use live on stage, and I try to inject some color into things, and I think that's what I brought to the table with the Barenaked Ladies. Their first two records are pretty much all acoustic, and I really brought in some. I like to sample sounds and create sounds, and that's my approach.
Yeah, and it's from a live performance viewpoint. Any particular anecdotes of note as far as highlights for you playing live with the Barenaked Ladies, or any even technical stuff that you've always found amusing? Train wrecks. We like train wrecks on the podcast.
Oh my gosh, I know there's so many, and when I'm put on the spot like this, then I can't remember. But let me think. I remember my first gig with the Barenaked Ladies. After the show, I started tearing down my synthesizers, and Robin, our sound man, came over and asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm packing up my gear. And he said, no, you don't do that. The crew does that. And so, I'd been schlepping in bars for 10 years. Like, okay. Gosh, I know there's some funny stories. Let me think.
That's right. We'll come back to them. Yeah.
Okay.
And in respect of songwriting, Kevin, so within Barenaked Ladies, before we get on to other stuff, you obviously have a songwriting role there.
I do. Yeah.
Do you find that process a little bit different? Well, it obviously is different to working on your own, but you find that a fairly organic process, or it's fairly well formalized?
Well, when I joined the band, I was really asked to join as the keyboardist and guitarist. So songwriting wasn't really on the ticket. But so I do my solo work on the side, and it was often well received, and I think the guys noticed and sort of made them more comfortable to bring me in that capacity, especially when I was, obviously committed to the band after a few records. And so now it's pretty comfortable. Every record we do, I bring in a few songs, and guys cherry pick the ones they like.
That's right. Well, that doesn't get much more organic than that, really.
Well,
no, that's good. And before we get on to yours, one last thing before your solo work, and that's you talked about your lawn darts revelation with Lou Reed. You obviously played a pivotal role as MD and keyboard player with Lou Reed for 7 or 8 years there. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into, again, how that was different for you and what you learnt from that experience?
Oh, from working with Lou?
Yeah.
Oh my God, working with Lou, I learned something a minute. He was just an amazing human being. And I remember we were rehearsing Candy Says, and he always liked me to sing in the rehearsals so he could sort of step back in the room and listen to how things were sounding. And he walked over and said, Kevin, listen to the lyrics of the song, and I really want to feel what they mean. I want you to sing it like you mean it. And to have, Lou Reed say that to you, it makes an impression, right? So, but he was on me. He was on top of me. My first few rehearsals with him, he really wanted me to try things because he wanted to get to know me and get to know what ideas were in my head. So I just kept trying things, and he would comment on them, and it was so nerve-wracking. But we were rehearsing Satellite of Love, and I had my Access Virus synth, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna open the filter and make sort of a sweeping sound, So I did this, and he stopped the band, and he goes, "Kevin, what was that? A rocket ship?" And he goes, "Don't do that."
Yeah.
But, then another time, I thought, okay, I'm going to play a sample of a celeste. I had a nice celeste sound.
Yep.
On Pale Blue Eyes. I put a little bit of reverb on it, and he stopped the band. He goes, "Kevin, you are a fucking mind reader. I love you."
So there you go.
Yeah. So it could go either way.
It could go either way. And I've said this to a couple of guests over previous episodes that when you're working with a true band leader, that's the way it goes. As far as it's hit and miss, and when you hit in a big way, but sometimes you will miss.
Yeah, and if I wasn't able to try anything, I probably would have been shown the door in about 10 minutes.
Actually, that's a great point. So obviously he wasn't looking for someone to just sit there and be told what to do. He was looking for someone that would put forward something different.
Yeah. I remember we were playing Perfect Day, and he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Kevin, congratulations. You know the record. I want to hear Kevin Hearn play it."
Yeah, well, it doesn't get much better than that, really.
No.
But no, thank you.
I loved Lou, though. I loved him as a friend, as a person. I miss him so much.
And it's just, I didn't realize until doing the research that it had been so many years already since he passed. It's just, it doesn't seem that long.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for sharing that. And so let's talk about your, just small amount of solo output. This only, it's blown my mind. And I feel like I have a bit of an insight into why you've produced so much great music across so many different areas based on what you said about how there was different music in every room of your house growing up. Because for those that don't know, Kevin's solo working with the band Thin Buckle, as you mentioned, the Rheostatics, with the Cousins, and then your what I'd call true solo work, is that it covers the whole gamut. So I don't even know where to start with this, but is that a fair appraisal, that it's just you love delving into anything that takes your fancy?
Yes. And I think there's a part of me that enjoys music that's perhaps lighthearted or has an element of humor in it, but I also really enjoy music with dark colors as well. To get to play Heroin with Lou every night.
Yeah,
it's like you're down in the dirt and playing for like your life depended on it. It was just incredible. And then with the Barenaked Ladies, we make up songs in the show and make people laugh. And I kind of love both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that's obvious from your work. And just, on the, in quotation marks, darker end of the spectrum, even your most recent album, Common Sense, I just found, and I obviously hadn't heard that until doing research, but listened to it end to end last night. It's a breathtaking instrumental album. It's just, I don't know, right up my alley, and I'll be linking to it in the show notes. But let's probably talk a little bit about that. What led to that one being recorded with your two collaborators?
Hugh Marsh on violin, who's a wonderful, just a wonderful player, and Chris Gartner, who I've been playing with for years in my band Thin Buckle. What led to that record was I had a reoccurrence of cancer, and it attacked me in my tongue. And so I had to be in treatment, and I couldn't talk for a long time. But I still wanted to make music, so I decided I'd make an instrumental record. And so I went up north to my cabin with Hugh and Chris and our engineer, Kenny Long, and made that record.
And it's, yeah, look, I again can't recommend it highly enough. And the isolation there, again, for non-Canadian listeners or those that don't live on lakes of the scale that Canada has. I mean, I spent only a couple of days on a lake in the late 90s with our Canadian friends, and it wasn't until then I realised just the scope and the scale of what you guys live in up there. And this is coming from a guy in one of the biggest continents on Earth as well. And that you can tell that has an impact on your music. Would that be a fair assessment?
Absolutely. It's really wild up there. And if you look at the cover of the record, it's a forest and the reflection in the water, but that's where the record was made, looking out at that view.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and I mean, I went in summer. I haven't braved a winter in Canada. I'll be the first to admit. So, and then obviously, that's that Common Sense album, Kevin, is one of many solo albums. Plans to do further ones, obviously?
I hope so. Yeah, I've been working on a few different ideas and things. So, been working on a few new songs with my cousin Harland, and I've been working on some new stuff with Hugh. So, but I'd really like to get out there though and perform the Common Sense record. So I'm actually preparing a video element to accompany the music. So hopefully if the world gets back to some level of normal, I'll do that.
No, that would be brilliant to see. And with, you mentioned Harlan and the cousin. So how would you describe, because the obvious, if I hadn't heard that album before and didn't know where it had originated, I would have said it's even got a bit of an Americana feel, which is not necessarily the best description for it. So, but how would you describe the album? It's brilliant.
Oh, the cousins? Well, first, I don't know if people know my cousin Harlan Williams, but he's an actor, comedian. He was in Dumb and Dumber, and he played the hitchhiker in Something About Mary. He's a very funny fellow. But he really wanted to be a musician and make a record. And I really wanted to be a comedian and make a funny record. So it sort of meets in the middle somewhere. And to me, it sounds like kind of a weird version of Ween or something. But
yeah, okay.
To me, I think of it in a way like the White Album by the Beatles. There's so many different flavors on it, and it just changes up all the time, and you never know really what to expect or what's coming around the corner. So I like to think of it that way.
Yeah, great. Now, I'm going to hopefully let you go relatively soon, but we're just going to briefly talk about gear. So you've already mentioned some of the stuff you love, but what's your... Let's use Barenaked Ladies in the first instance. What's your go-to rig that you backline or take with you when you're touring and performing?
Well, I have a Yamaha piano that is it's a hybrid piano. It has real keys and real hammers, but they're hitting a sample strip. Yeah. So it's always in tune, but it has the feel like I'm playing a piano, and I really like that. I believe it's called the N1, or whatever the latest version of that is, because they've sort of updated it every few years. And then on top, I have a controller keyboard, and it's like an Axiom.
Oh, yep.
Axiom controller keyboard, and it's connected to my laptop where I have MainStage, and I have all the sounds I've either created or sounds from like the Moog plugins, that sort of thing. Yeah,
so and you got some go-to plugins you use, Kevin? So the Moog one you've mentioned, other ones you couldn't live without?
Well, when I'm recording the Mellotron one, the M-Tron has come in really handy, and what's the really nice synth one that I use? God, I can't remember the damn name of it. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
No problems.
So,
but a main stage convert, it's fair to say.
Yeah, and the one I can't remember, that's the one I really like.
It's always the way.
Is it called Abyss or Bliss or
It could be busy. Yeah, there's so many. That's the thing. It's hard to remember all the names.
There's a nice piano one too called Giant that I like.
Oh, yep. Yeah, Giant. That's a Native Instruments one. Yep.
Yeah.
That's great. No, excellent. And so in the coming year for you, Kevin, obviously subject to us hopefully getting back to some state of normal, what's coming up for you in the coming 12 months?
Well, I guess we'll catch up on all these tours we've had to cancel, hopefully. I don't know. Do you know the Violent Femmes? I played on their record too. We Can Do Anything.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, big Violent Femmes fan.
Yeah, I did the record cover. I did the drawing on the cover of that record, and I play keyboards on it too.
I'll definitely be checking that one out. They're regular visitors to Australia, the Violent Femmes. We see them quite often.
Yeah, well, Brian lives in Tasmania, doesn't he?
See, I didn't realise that. Yeah. Oh, there you go. That would explain why they're in Australia a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah, good friend of mine. Good guy.
And will we see you in Australia at some stage? I mean,
we've been planning it. We got to come back, and we were planning it, but now it's probably not going to be for a while. But we do want to come back for sure. I've never even been. I've never been there. I was in the hospital the last time Ben was there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And I mean, I think Common Sense at the Sydney Opera House, and I've used this line on another guest before, but I think Common Sense at the Opera House would go down a treat just, while you're here, a bit of a side gig.
Book it for me, man. Let's do it. I'll send you my rider.
Yeah, that's all right. Oh, that's funny. And our last question, and this is a put you on the spot question, Kevin, but it's a pleasant one, and that's Desert Island Discs. So five albums you couldn't live without.
Oh, geez, Louise. Okay. I'm just going to look through. I got to have a collection of Sun Ra's music.
Yeah.
I got to have a Lou Reed, maybe Velvet Underground.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe the Banana album. I'm going to have, let's see, Bob Marley.
Oh, yep.
And the Wailers. Maybe some Kaya. What am I at now?
That's 3.
Okay, how many more do I have?
You can have as many as you want, really, but we do 5.
Okay.
It's not legally mandated.
I'm not going to get arrested.
No, that's right.
6 records. Oh, there's a record called "A Meeting by the River" by Cooder and VM Bhatt. Yep. Oh, gorgeous. And okay, we need a good synth record, right?
Yeah, good idea.
Okay. Okay, a good synth record. Okay, let's do Howard Jones, Humans Lib.
Oh, now you've sold me.
Okay, and OMD, OMD Greatest Hits.
Look, it's the I'm going to stop here because OMD are obviously a rabid fan, and I'm very excited to be seeing them. Hopefully, for the first time ever this year, they're touring with Simple Minds in Australia towards the end of the year, and I bought the tickets. I mean, I like Simple Minds, but they're the headliners. But I actually bought the tickets because OMD were the support.
Cool. I love OMD. I love those guys.
Yeah. And they're still kicking on with really strong releases. That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand that don't follow them. They're just putting out really good stuff still.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, that's a great suite. You've certainly picked some good ones there. So, can't thank you enough. I know you've had a busy afternoon and early evening, and really appreciate it. I barely feel like we've scratched the surface, but that's what'll happen when you have a long and successful career as a player.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed that. As I mentioned in the intro, Kevin's body of work is enormous, and it was really difficult to try and cover that in the time we had, but we definitely tried our best. And do check out the show notes for the episode at keyboardchronicles.com because I'll have links to a whole range of Kevin's work, and it is well and truly worth having a closer look at. I know it's on my regular playlist now. So again, thank you as always for joining us. We love to hear from you. We'll be back in a fortnight, but you can keep in touch with us via a few means. So our website, as I've just mentioned, is www.keyboardchronicles.com. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Keyboard Chronicles and on Twitter at the Keyboard CHR1. If you'd like good old-fashioned email, then drop us a line at editor@keyboardchronicles.com. And thank you to those that have emailed. We are getting an increasing volume of emails with guest suggestions and other feedback, and it is seriously appreciated. We really do enjoy it. So, most importantly, thanks to you for listening, and I hope to see you back here next episode.